Watercolor techniques. The first technique that you're going to work on is a watercolor wash. With the watercolor wash, you want to work with a smooth, even amount of color. The way to achieve this is to activate your watercolor by adding water to it, and then using more water than ink itself and spreading it across a space to create a smooth, even surface of color. The next technique that you're going to do is called a gradation. You want to think of it in terms of creating a variation of tones from dark to light, and you're going to do this through water. You're going to start with a heavy amount of color, and then you're going to transition that heavy amount of color using water across a space. The more water you add, the more transparent it's going to be. You can see here I went back and I added more pigment to the darker section so that I can get a variation of tones and values. The next box is going to be for line detail. It's important to understand that with watercolor, you can control it enough to create exquisite detail with the tip of your paintbrush. It's important to control the amount of water on the paintbrush, and it's also important to control how you hold the paintbrush, making sure that only the tip is doing the work, not pressing the entire brush down onto the piece of paper. The next two sections are for hard edges and soft edges. Basically, it's just understanding that if you control the amount of water on your brush, you can control the types of edging you have with your watercolor. A hard edge has a nice crisp edge because you control the amount of water, meaning less water, more pigment. A soft edge is the complete opposite. You don't care how the edges finish off. It's more about the placement of tone and color, and it has a natural finish. All right, so you're going to create a box for the next section. This section is called Wet on Wet. In this section, you're going to use a paintbrush dipped in water, and you're going to fill the space with water. And you'll see here, I took wet watercolors and just dabbed it right into that wet section on my square, and it created like a tie-dye effect. So you're putting wet watercolor on a wet piece of paper to get the wet on wet technique. The more you add, the more the watercolor moves around. You can mix colors and blend colors and just really play around and have fun with dropping the watercolor down and letting it kind of move naturally where it wants to go to spread and blend. All right, in our next section, we're going to do some paint dabs, and I just want you to explore with the tip of the paintbrush by picking color and dabbing it on. It's almost like making dots or stipple, but play around with how the brush hits the paper. If you just put a little bit of pressure, it's small dots. If you put a lot of pressure, it creates these kind of wonky organic shapes. So mix colors, blend colors, and just play around with different types of dabbing and pressure. All right, our last section here is tissue paper or paper towels or whatever paper you have lying next to you. You're basically doing a wet on wet technique, applying many colors of watercolor, and then you're using your towel or tissue paper to create texture within that wet on wet before it dries. So I'm just putting down color and I'm dabbing it with the crunched up paper towel or piece of paper and seeing what kind of fun textures I can come up with. And I just do it back and forth, and I keep going until I'm satisfied with the look. So just play, have fun, and see what you can create. These are only some of many watercolor techniques that you can do. The purpose of this is so that you're successful with your mandala.